From Mickey Mouse to Wilson the volleyball, from seeing a face in an outlet cover to naming your car. We love to give things human qualities. We do it every day. We've done it our whole lives, starting from our first toy to all the way up until the cold embrace of death. We just love to anthropomorphize things. But why? Why do we do it? Well, in the last video, I set up a bit of the framework for this series about talking about the origins of psychology and philosophy. Today, I want to dive a little bit deeper into anthropomorphism. And I'm just gonna kind of skip animism a bit because I feel that anthropomorphism and animism go pretty well together. I'm just gonna skip that one and kind of just include it with this one. Sorry, animism. So what does anthropomorphism mean? Well, it comes from the Greek word anthropomorphos, which is broken into two parts. Anthropos, which means human being, and morphe, which means form. So together it's human being form, or the form of a human being. A brief description of what anthropomorphism really means is just applying human-like emotions or feelings or qualities onto non-human objects or entities or agents. This includes gods, it includes pets, the sun, rocks, it includes cars, plants, and weather even. Just to carry this point a little further, have you ever had a pet rock or seen Stonehenge or even read the book The Great Stone Face by Nathaniel Hawthorne? Well, these are all examples of carving, more or less, a human image into a non-human object, a rock. But now, let me back up a little bit and make sure that we're clear that what anthropomorphism isn't is not to say that the tiger is aggressive, or the tornado is dangerous, or even that a car is reliable. Those are just statements of fact. It's not anthropomorphizing something. Now, if you were to say the tiger is a murderer, or the tornadoes seem to pass everyone else and come directly after you, well, or if your car is reliable because you wash her every week, well, you start to see that you're putting human-esque qualities onto non-human objects. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe that there are times it may seem like a tornado is coming directly for you. But to imply that that's its intent is anthropomorphizing. Or to say that your car is reliable because you wash it or her or him every week, then that's A, applying a type of gender, if you would, onto the car. And B, it's implying that the car is giving you something back for something that you're doing that doesn't necessarily affect how the car runs. Now, if you say your car is reliable because you change its oil regularly, well, yeah, that's just how cars work. We do this all the time. We put an anthropomorphic lens on the world. But why? Let's get to the why. One theory that's proposed by Caparella and Hayes in an article that I'll list below is that it's a cognitive default. And now, to explain that, let me give you a little bit of background. Alright, well, first, just a little bit of nerdy brain talk. I'll keep it simple. So your brain accounts for about 2% of your body weight, but it requires about 20% of your caloric intake, meaning the energy you take in. It takes about 20% of it, leaving 80% for the rest of the 98% of the body. Now, your brain has evolved to take as little intake as it can, so that it can give the rest of your body as much as it can. That's how we're able to stay functional. And now, to do that, your brain has to make a lot of shortcuts and a lot of predictions and assumptions. And so, in order to make a prediction or assumption, often what you need to do is you need to have some knowledge or some information about what you're trying to make a prediction about. So, for example, if you lived 60,000 years ago, you might not have a whole lot of experience with a saber-toothed tiger or a tiger. I don't really know what animals they were. I didn't do that part of the research. But you wouldn't know what their behaviors are like, or why they move, or because they don't they don't act like humans, they don't walk on two legs, but they do have a face and they do move and they act. So it's reasonable for your brain to associate that animal with something alive. And the only thing that your brain has a lot of familiarity with is yourself. And so you start to think of, well, if I was that tiger, what would that tiger be doing? And with that tiger is seeming to be aggressive, that must mean that he's angry or that he's trying to protect something. And so your brain starts to make predictions of the tiger or maybe even the storm. Why is the wind blowing so hard? Why does it feel like it's pushing me? And maybe the storm is angry. Or you could even say, why is it raining? And you say, well, then your brain, it starts to think, well, the water's falling and it's in almost like teardrops. And so maybe it just means that the sky is sad. And you don't even have to go back 60,000 years ago to think about a time when people anthropomorphized the world around them. You just have to go back to when you were a child. Because as a child, we don't have a lot of knowledge about science, which is basically the staple of what we use today. Pretty much everyone believes, at least in some degree, that science is where we'll get a lot of our answers. But now a child doesn't understand science. I barely understand science. And so what a child does is they see a house cat or a dog or the sun or really anything, and their brain that doesn't have a lot of different answers or experience with the world, it starts to try to make sense of what's going on around it. Your brain has to quickly analyze a situation. This is a way that your brain and body have developed in order to keep you alive. If you hesitate too long, then that could often result in either dying or not finding a mate, or as today we would say a spouse, a wife, or a husband, a partner, or even not getting the right job. And so your brain is really good at making quick predictions that'll help you evolve and progress. Now, there's also a danger when it comes to anthropomorphizing, and that's the opposite, which is dehumanization. We do this all the time. And put simply, it's when we take a human or something like a human and we take away the human qualities and plaster on some other qualities. And I'll talk about that in a different video. So today, when we want to make a educated prediction, it's relatively simple. We go to Google, we go to someone who knows, someone who's experienced this before, and we ask them and we get some information, and that allows our brain some more information to be able to make more accurate predictions. But they didn't have Google 60,000 years ago. And a child, doesn't know how to use Google. They don't know how to read yet, so they just have to go based on what the brain is predicting. And, it's not crazy that people see faces in outlet covers or rocks, or even, I think we've all seen a car or two that looks like it's smiling, not counting Cars by Disney. And now, the reason that's not crazy is because you got to think about the information your brain is receiving. So what happens is your brain is processing the signals that the eyes are sending it. The eyes just sends the brain a box of files that just have orientations of edges and some color splashed over them, and says, okay, what is it? What does this look like to you? And your brain has to make sense of those edges and splashes of color. And so what your brain does is it sorts out these edges and colors and puts it into the most accurate folder that it can. And so, for example, when you see a human face, your brain has a specific area that stores human faces, so that it can, if it sees anything that looks like a human face, that department says, I'll take that, and they start to identify the human face. That's called the fusiform face area. Now, what's interesting is that area of the brain lights up whether you see a friend, your mom, your enemy, your cousin 3 times removed on your mother's side, but it also lights up when you see an animal's face, or even it lights up when you see something that just resembles a face. Well, that kind of makes sense because your brain is making sense of edges and lines and colors. But now if it's dark, it's just making sense off of edges. So evolutionary wise, it makes sense that your brain would be able to take a group of edges and say that looks like a face. And so that's why you anthropomorphize often, is you see something and you say, oh, well, that looks like a face. That must be a person, or at least have human-like qualities. And so what I've been trying to say with this video is anthropomorphism isn't a crazy way of viewing the world. Arguably, it's the most natural way to view the world. It's really just the way that you process the world without anyone telling you how to process the world. It's the natural state of processing the world, and it's really fascinating. It's a very human-centered way of explaining everything. You can think of it as you are the Earth and the universe revolves around you, because no one's told you that that's wrong yet. However, unfortunately, as you gain more knowledge and more experience, your brain can make more accurate predictions, and it makes you realize that you're really not the center of the universe. And so, as your brain begins to notice and note differences and make better predictions, then it leads you to seek out new explanations for the world around you. And we'll talk about one of those in the next video.